Thank you, Neil, and good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Environment, Housing and Regeneration Select Committee, and my name is Councillor Wayne Bridges. I am Chairman of this meeting. A key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and hold an in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you'll be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. For those in the public gallery, you will not be on camera this evening. A reminder to councillors, officers and those speaking today that you should turn your microphone buttons on when speaking. This will ensure you can be heard in the room and by those watching online. Some quick housekeeping rules before I go on to the main agenda. We are not expecting a fire alarm this evening. However, if one does sound, please follow officers to fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting point, which is the Civic Centre forecourt. Mobile devices to be placed on silent or switched off, and residents are welcome to give feedback about this meeting. Forms are available in the room, and there is also a version online underneath the broadcast. With that said, we move to apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, apologies received from Councillor Chapman, with Councillor Troubadour present as his substitute.
Thank you very much, and a warm welcome to Councillor Troubadour for subbing this evening. Any declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting? I can see no indication, in which case I can confirm that all business this evening will be discussed in Part 1. We move on to Item 4, which is to agree the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 6. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Just go to Item 38. There were two things on there I just wanted to say. It was, I think we did give our thanks to the officers during that meeting, just to get out on the record for all the work they did during the pandemic, and also to confirm that we did receive the ASBET warning letter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? No, in which case can we agree? Thank you very much. Item 5 is the update on the work of green spaces and the impact of COVID-19 on the Council's parks and open spaces. A warm welcome to Paul this evening, who will be giving the presentation on this item. Paul, whenever you're ready, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was asked to provide an update on green spaces, and I thought it would be quite useful to put it into the context of the impact that COVID-19 has had on the Council's parks and open spaces. Obviously, we've provided a bit of a report for you to have a look at. And obviously what I'll do is I'll summarise the main key points of that report as I go through. So I think what we found with the COVID-19 pandemic, the Council's parks and open spaces were extremely important to our residents. There was obviously lots of restrictions that were applied, which restricted what people were able to do. But the parks remained open. They remained a place for peace and play and inspiration, and we've got quite a lot of feedback from visitors that were visiting parks for the first time, exploring parts of the borough for the first time. So you know, they were certainly well received, and people were really grateful for us making those spaces available to them. Having seen a great number of visitors, an increase in visitors using our parks and open spaces, that did present a number of challenges, and I sort of alluded to some of the challenges that we experienced as a result. Quantities of litter was a problem, not just in Hillingdon, but shared across all my colleagues who are managing parks and open spaces. And we also saw an increase in dog ownership, and obviously that has its challenges as well, but obviously the staff adapted to that. You know, when you look at parks, they were primarily designed for the Victorian era, the Victorian period, and a lot of the park's infrastructure is being designed for that. So obviously seeing this increased number of people, many sort of dining al fresco, does present some challenges, and obviously we address that. We've increased in capacity in bins in busy parks, and obviously increasing the number of staff where we possibly could to deal with litter picks and the like. We also saw an increase in sport activity. Obviously, there was restrictions at the start of the pandemic, but as those restrictions relaxed, and I think there was certainly a keenness and enthusiasm to try to make sporting venues available as safely as possible. And the first that we were able to make available was the tennis courts, and again we saw an influx in the use of people playing tennis. We had already started to make some improvements to our tennis courts with working closely with the Lawn Tennis Association, the LTA, and we put in place the facility to enable people to book, and we found that was very well received, because again people could then turn up knowing that they'd got a court to play on, and they wouldn't have to sort of compete with others that were on there. Also, having these levels of control just made sure that the courts were being used for the purposes that they're intended, so we wouldn't have the antisocial behaviour that we'd experienced when the courts were just left open. Obviously, with such sort of initiative like this, we couldn't sort of make all the courts adapted at the same time, so obviously this has been a bit of a phased approach and something that we're continuing to move on. And obviously what we've done fairly recently is we've introduced a small charge for people to play tennis, and then obviously that then helps invest into the facilities for the longer term. Football, again, that was sort of a sport that was not allowed for a little while, but then again as restrictions started to be relaxed, we found more and more people wanting to play football. We supported that by ensuring that the goals and the football facilities, marking out and all that sort of thing was still available all through the summer. Some of the football clubs had games to catch up because obviously, they when the games were originally cancelled. So again, we provided that opportunity. So lots of football games were being played over the summer months, and obviously we helped with that. We're also working again closely with the Football Association, the Football Foundation, which is their sort of charitable arm of the Football Foundation, which provides the funding. And then obviously we're part of the Middlesex FA, and we work very closely with them, and we're looking at again supporting our football clubs, and we're working closely with a number of clubs across the borough, both north and south, on sort of projects to assist them to improve their pitches. Again, another sport that we saw a big increase was recreational cricket. Again, this was really people just getting together and making their own sort of cricket wickets up and having a game themselves. But acknowledging this, we've been working with the English Cricket Board on funding to provide artificial wickets and practice nets at a couple of our sites. Cowley Recreation Ground, which has been a popular site for occasional cricket, and Grassy Meadows, again, is another site that we've seen quite a bit of cricket, occasional cricket being played. So both those sites are going to sort of benefit in the future for better facilities. Obviously, as a borough, we've got a lot of clubs that play bowls, and again, the elderly residents were keen to get back playing bowls. They were keen to get back in a safe way. It was quite clear that social isolation had a huge negative impact on that particular age groups, and number were obviously living alone. So having that opportunity to play bowls again and socialise again was so important for them. So again, they were very grateful that we were able to open those facilities in a safe way. The other thing that that was quite frustrating for our park users was that following government guidelines, we had to sort of fence off the playgrounds, the children's playscapes. And that obviously was with safety in mind. But again, as those restrictions were relaxed and we opened up the playgrounds, once again having that facility in the parks as well as the outdoor gyms was again of huge benefit to our residents. So it's quite clear that, you know, COVID was obviously a sort of a very negative situation for people because of the ways that it limited their ability to sort of socialise and get out and about. So parks were fundamentally so important. A lot of our residents don't have the benefit of a outdoor space themselves. They don't have their own garden. So having access to a park with the facilities that we have available was so well received. So that was really good to sort of see. And, you know, my staff did a sort of an incredible job keeping the parks open for the challenges that I sort of have already alluded to. The other thing that we've been keen on addressing is the environmental benefits of our parks. We've worked with, again, a number of partners. We're working closely with an organisation, a charitable organisation called Trees for Cities, looking at creative ways to increase our tree stock for the benefits that are sort of are pretty well known now. Obviously, we had the big sort of conference up in Glasgow, and obviously it's been very high in the media. And the interest of our public is very keen on seeing the environment improved, and obviously we're sort of following those sorts of lines and those sorts of initiatives ourselves. We also sort of keep a keen eye on what developers are doing. So obviously I've got a principal landscape officer who's sort of keeping an eye on the new builds and looking at planning applications to ensure their green credentials are also being followed. This year we're offering a tree sponsorship scheme. We're aware that a number of people would like to purchase a tree and have a tree for various different reasons. Now, we're not keen on people planting remembrance trees. What we're wanting is trees that are planted for celebration. So we're working with Trees for Streets, and we're starting to see a number of people interested in planting a tree outside in their own street, or a tree actually in one of the parks. So it's a new initiative. We were one of the sort of first pioneers with Trees for Streets, one of the first London boroughs and one of the first boroughs in the country to work with this particular initiative, and it's already starting to gather a bit of pace and a bit of interest. We're working on increasing our sort of biodiversity. We've been looking at the ways that we manage our grass, our sward. It's in the past it's always been sort of close mown. Now what we've done is, as you've probably seen, is we've done a couple of ways to enhance and encourage the increase in biodiversity. One initiative was to sort of sow and plant plants that are primarily for encouraging pollinators, so you know, quite bright flowers, poppies, cornflowers and those sorts of things, and we planted those in roadside verges. And probably we've had the most compliments of any initiative that this council has undertaken with this particular idea. So it's been so well received, and we started it as a pilot and we've extended that pilot. The reason that it's a pilot is that we want to ensure that it is self-sustainable. We don't really want to keep having to re-sow these particular verges every year. What we want them to do is sow themselves naturally, grow naturally. So we've given them a bit of a head start, but the idea is that the plantings will then shed their own seed. That goes into the soil, and then obviously that regerminates, and the life cycle then continues. What is key there, though, is that the maintenance thereafter is strictly abided by, and that really is about when we cut the material down, that we remove the arisings from these particular plantings, and then that will then ensure that the soil is then impoverished, because with wildflowers you want low soil fertility rather than high soil fertility, and then that will encourage the wildflowers to keep going. So that's an initiative that we then introduced, and as I said, well received. The other initiative running alongside this is this sort of no mow May idea that you might have seen in the media. And this is just to leave areas of your own grass. Obviously we've got a lot of it, but people have been doing it at home. And if you leave it, don't cut it, wildflowers will present themselves. And that's what we've done in a number of areas in Hillingdon. Now, we tried this a few years ago, and we got a lot of negative responses to the point we had to then go back to cutting the grass. We've tried it again this year, and the response has been quite the reverse. It's been very positively received. And we've got examples where we've left grass to grow, and we've seen natural wildflowers present themselves. And in fact, we've had orchids that have been counted this summer. Along the line of the sort of environment, we're obviously aware that with climate change, our weather patterns are changing, and we're getting high extremes of heat, and we're also getting high extremes of rainfall. So again, we know that that has an impact on the borough and on our residents. So we're looking at ways that we can design schemes that address that at source, if you like, to prevent it sort of entering the river all in one go or down drains all in one go. So we've got a number of initiatives that we're looking at implementing there to sort of manage the surface water, particularly in those periods of downpour. The other area we're looking at, we obviously grow quite a few plants ourselves, and we're quite keen that we try to reduce the amount of peat. Peat is a product which is great for growing plants in, but obviously it's extracted from the natural environment. It has a role to play in trapping carbon. It also has a role of upholding biodiversity in wetland areas. Primarily, it's made from sphagnum moss, which then rots down. Pulling that out of the peat bogs does have a negative connotation to it. So we're trying to reduce the amount of peat that we use in our material, with the view that we don't use peat long term at all, looking at alternatives to that. We're also looking at the equipment that we use. Obviously we've got a lot of machinery that we use that uses petrol or diesel, and we're looking at initiatives that are presenting themselves in the marketplace now for electric equipment. The domestic market is probably a little bit further ahead of this than in the professional market, just because of the length of time that we use the equipment and the sorts of work that we carry out. But that is changing year on year, and we're seeing new advances in these sorts of equipment. So we're sort of following suit and taking advantage of that. As you know, we pride ourselves on our quality of our parks, and we use a number of accolades to sort of benchmark that, and we've been very successful this year in the London in Bloom competition, and also with green flags again. So we hold the most green flags, as you know, in the country, and obviously green flag is sort of expanded worldwide now. So when you compare Hillingdon to other countries, we do hold the most green flags in the world. It's important we don't forget our residents in the work that they do in looking after their gardens and their flower displays, and also the vegetables that they grow. And our own competition for our residents, Hillingdon in Bloom, is very important. And again, well received. It enhances our borough because obviously people are looking after their gardens. We want to see more people garden their front gardens rather than pave them over for just parking. So if they can come up with a bit of a combination of both, we have a particular category for that, and obviously we reward that with some prizes. The autumn show that we have, which is both flowers and vegetables, grows from strength to strength, and is very popular. And even in these difficult times, we've managed to continue with that particular show, as we have done with our Hillingdon in Bloom. We're not able to judge the gardens in person, but we ask our residents to submit photographs, and we we inspect them and reward them accordingly. Again, I think our floral displays are very, very popular across the borough. Our hanging baskets, our planters, and as already mentioned, that we're starting to look at ways that we reduce the amount of peat in the compost. We're also looking at better water retention and again plant selection to ensure that the plants are more sustainable as well. So we're looking at a number of schemes. If you have a look at our roundabouts as well, a number of now moving away from annual bedding to permanent planting. We've got roundabouts planted with lavender for benefits of our pollinators, and we've also got a number of roundabouts that have a mixture of planting of shrubs and herbaceous material. Again, it's more sustainable, has a little bit more all year round interest, but again, we're not having to rip those plantings out twice a year and replace them with annual bedding. So that is a bit more of a preferred approach. At the start of my little presentation, I talked about some of the challenges relating to visitor numbers, and obviously Ruislip Lido is a case in point. Again, we've probably been a victim of our own success there. We've provided a fantastic resource, a popular resource, but obviously it does present itself with challenges on how we manage the number of people. Particularly when we've had restrictions around social distancing, how could we actually manage that particular site? So we put in controls to manage the number of people that were attending. We put one-way systems in around the lake to ensure people were best protected as far as we could possibly do. So that gives a little oversight of some of the things that we've been doing, how popular our parks have actually been in certainly very difficult times, and some of the initiatives that we've got around enhancing and improving the environment as well. So hopefully that gives a sort of a rounded view of green spaces and the impact that COVID had on the Council of Parks and Open Spaces. So that's me.
Thank you very much, Paul. We'll now invite questions from members. I can see a few hands going up. Maybe I can perhaps begin with a question to you, Paul, in regards to the tree sponsorship. It gave reference to it in the report, but I didn't see any exact numbers of how many residents have taken up this scheme to date. Perhaps you could expand on that, please.
Yeah, it's. I'm still waiting for the final figures. What we've done is originally it was going to expire in December, but what I've done is extended it until January. What we've thought about is that with Christmas, that people might be thinking about an alternative, an unusual Christmas present. So we've just done a little bit more promotion on that. So we've done some social media promotion, and we're also looking at some adverts to go through social media as well, which targets. But I can find the actual numbers. I've got a meeting with Trees for Cities next week just to look at what the interest has been. How the system works is that though people come onto our website to be signposted to the sponsorship, it goes through the Trees for Cities who collate everything, then come back to us with all the information, and then we implement it. So it's a bit of a joined up approach. So yeah, I certainly share that information through Neil as soon as I get it.
Thank you very much, Neil. If you could follow up on that outside of the meeting. Start with Councillor Brightman.
Thank you, Chairman. Very good report, Paul. Thank you. And as a resident, I absolutely appreciate our green spaces.
Oh, thank you.
And it's actually been proven to improve mental health.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lack of green space can cause quite serious sense of unwellness. Just a couple of points, if I may. I love the idea of the tennis courts, but in the south, I was wondering if perhaps they may be well, not necessarily just the south, but they may be means tested, because there are families where if you've got a youngster that's keen to play tennis, the £5 a day per court to go and practice would essentially eat up their disposable income if they have any. So I wondered if there was possibly a scheme involved there going down the road.
Yeah, I think, obviously we've been sort of collating and looking at the feedback that we've got. So some has been positive and some has been not so positive, picking up some of the points that you've just raised there. So I think what we're looking at is a review of the pricing structure to sort of see if there is a sort of a almost like a season ticket or something of that nature that we could actually think about implementing. Because we know what we don't want is the charge to put off people. And if you've got people that want to play on several times during the week, then, you know, a £5 fee soon sort of mounts up. But if you can then sort of introduce some sort of pass, if you like, then that would then help spread the cost a little bit. So yeah, we certainly acknowledge that, and something that we're certainly considering to sort of review and change.
Excellent idea. And if I may just ask my second question.
Sure.
With regard to allotments, because that's another area that's been absolutely gone down the storm during lockdown, because people can take their socially distanced exercise. I understand that there's new contracts being issued, for, new agreements with plot holders, and some of the allotment holders, some of the self-managed and LBH managed allotment holders are saying that they haven't received the new agreements yet, and so people are stacking up on the waiting list. I wondered if there's something to address that, please.
So you're very right, Councillor. You know, I think again allotments, we've seen a sort of a huge interest in allotments, grow your own, and again I think people having a lot more time at home has sort of generated that interest. During the COVID period, obviously we didn't want to enforce our allotment policies relating to non-cultivation. So, you know, what we wanted to do is just sort of let people, because obviously some people were self-isolating, they couldn't attend their allotment. It'd be unfair for us to then sort of intervene and say, look, you know, we just inspected the allotment, you haven't been down there for a number of months, we're going to give it to somebody else on the waiting list. So that's caused us a bit of an issue as far as that we've had a sort of almost a 12-month period where we haven't done any sort of enforcement and checking that people are actually cultivating their plots to free up plots for those on the waiting list. So we're now going through a process, and we need to get a little bit more resource to help us with this particular process, because what we need to do is identify what sites are available and those people that are no longer wanting their allotments. And obviously we've got a long list of people now wanting an allotment. So our list is growing longer, and obviously we've got a bit of housekeeping still to catch up on in allocating those plots. But we're starting to work through that list. Now the bit that you just sort of mentioned and alluded to was obviously looking at some of the terms and conditions. We're aware that when we actually looked at some of the terms and conditions that they were somewhat ancient. So we need to bring those up to the modern day. So that's again a piece of work that we're doing, and obviously once we've got that sort of ratified, we will then share that with the plot holders. So there's lots of work going on behind the scenes, and obviously I know that there's some frustration with some of the allotment committees because they're not sort of seeing things happen as quickly as they so wish. We're also aware that people on the waiting list think because, you know, they've shown an interest, when do they get their plot, they're eager and keen. We're hopeful that we'll get the sort of situation certainly improved by the time people want to start growing. So over the winter months, we're now looking at a programme of ways that we can sort of square this up and start to get people cultivating plots, because fundamentally that's what we want to do. We're also aware that unfortunately some people on allotment plots don't get on as well as you think they would. So we've got a few sort of issues around relationships as well that we need to address. So it's quite a complex little area, but just to try to reassure you, that's something that we're working on and we'll hopefully square up as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
On page 9, top paragraph, saying about planting trees, my concern is about the saplings that are on the sides of roads that, I suppose only described as yobbos on bikes go along and knock them over and just pull them out of the ground. Is there any way that we can secure them a lot better? Does that make sense? It's just that also we... along the front of Dawley Road by Lake Farm, where they just get pushed down all the time. Is there any way that we could either secure them or maybe go back a couple of days after planting to make sure they're secure? Because Scott and I are constantly getting reports from people, and it's near where I live, so I see them anyway, but it just seems that's a waste to me. What procedures do you have?
There's a couple of things that we're looking at, because as you rightly say, Councillor, it is quite frustrating. We actually go to the lengths to plant a tree, and then someone feels it's it's quite funny just to pull it out of the ground or snap it off at the top. So a lot of the trees that you're referring to is what we refer to as standards, obviously we're looking at ways that we can improve those to make them less of a target to vandals. The other thing that we're looking at is that we're also looking at a different planting style, and we've tried a little bit of this as an experiment, and we're going to do a bit more of it, and this is working with our partner Trees for Cities, in that we plant in mass, but we plant smaller trees to start off with, which are less likely to get damaged, and if they do, you've got plenty there that will then come and fill the gaps. But we know that those sorts of trees establish a lot quicker. Street trees, growing trees in streets is quite hostile. It's very hot, it's very dry, it has all the sort of air pollution and other things that sort of get thrown at it. So looking at a different approach, looking at very younger trees, which will then have what we refer to as a better shoot-to-root ratio, they get away a lot quicker. So it's planting smaller will actually out-accelerate a larger tree in time. And that's an approach that we've done a bit of work on, done a bit down at Long Lane as a trial this year, and we're looking at expanding that to other sites this winter. And the site that you mentioned is an area, it's a very wide verge there, and we're looking at the possibilities of that. That also has the benefit of reducing the amount of grass cutting we have to do, because I think trees will have a lot more benefit biodiversity point of view than the sort of standard trees and the grass. The other thing we're doing with Trees for Cities is Trees for Cities engage with schools a lot more. So if we get children involved in tree planting, we're hopeful that that younger generation will then start to take an interest in their environment and then respect their environment. And some of the things that you've just alluded to, hopefully with a test of time, we'll start to see less and less of them.
Thank you. Do you wish to follow up, Councillor Gardner? Yep.
On page 11, about the floral displays, who actually decides where they'll go?
Well, the floral displays, I think over time, they've just, through requests through ward budgets and other requests that have been made, they've sort of expanded with time. Obviously, we have a contract that we have in place to grow them, to plant them and then maintain them. And that contract, the list of those sites, is then shared as part of the Cabinet report that goes. We're obviously aware that that there are lots of different requests for these sort of planters, these annual planters, and again that's something that we're looking at the moment. Obviously, from a cost point of view, you've got to have a limit on how many you have. It's not we don't have a sort of an endless budget that we can just keep growing the number of hanging baskets and planters. So we need to be mindful of the costs that these actually do cost, and we need to make sure that we're using them in the best possible places, and our residents are benefiting from them in the most positive of ways as well. So.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Paul, for an extremely good report. I didn't know green spaces did that amount of things, but there you are. It's really good. Just coming back to Janet's question, and if I may, Chairman, we've got planters around in the town centres, and what we did initially was to get companies involved in purchasing these. We managed to get the people that were resurfacing RAF Northolt's runway to sponsor some, and this sort of thing, and that helped to supplement the ward budget as well, if that makes any sense.
And what we found this year, if you have a look in Uxbridge above the railway station, the tube station, and also there's some planters around some old telephone boxes. They're not funded by us, they're funded by Uxbridge Bid. So that is another initiative that's then sort of come together to fund some additional planters. They're using the same company as we use, a company called Window Flowers, who have the current contract. But that relationship between Window Flowers is direct with Uxbridge Bid. But what it does mean is that the look and feel, the types of plants that are being used is the same. So, you know, it all looks seamless and it all looks as one. But again, that's just another idea of where we're getting some sort of sponsorship.
Yeah.
Our roundabouts are also sponsored. So you'll see the sort of signs for different local companies on those roundabouts. So that actually generates income that then we use to pay for the bedding plants and the other plants that we have in those flower beds. So again, that's another initiative that we've got in place that offsets the costs and enables us to do a lot more in making the borough, you know, a beautiful place.
Chairman, can I just ask my question? Being a sort of a Lido groupie, if you like, we use the Lido a lot. And over the COVID period, it's been absolutely amazing for people to get out and walk, etc. We've noticed, though, that there's a lot of licensed dog walkers or dog walkers that have got 6 dogs, and notice that when they walk around, they don't pick up. And all the dog bins, or most of the dog bins, are full, and there's loads on the ground. So I think we need some more dog bins around the Lido pool. Just to stop this, you know, mindless sort of letting dogs do what they want, you know.
Yeah, I think you're certainly right, Councillor. I think, as I sort of alluded to in my report, is that we've seen a huge increase in dog ownership, and as a result, you know, we're getting more dog waste, if you like. You know, I think what we need to do there is you know, I noted your concern about the Lido dog bins. They should be emptied on a certain frequency.
Sure.
I think what's happened is that they've gone to the winter frequency where they should still continue with the summer frequency because of the demand that we're now seeing. So, you know, we're not seeing a drop-off summer and winter with dog ownership. It's the same people going around. So we just need to adjust that, and, you know, that you'll get a response that, you know, we're increasing the frequency to address that. The point you raised about licensing and commercial dog walking, again, we've seen a huge increase in that with entrepreneurs, again, that might have been furloughed or what, you know, they were just looking at other employment opportunities, and taking people's dogs for a walk is obviously one of them. We've now established a licence process in Hillingdon. So if you're walking a number of dogs, you need to have a licence, so you need to apply for a licence, and we will enforce that. So, you know, we only permit licensed dog owners. We're obviously aware that dogs are a pack animal, so if you've got a large group of them, they need to be well looked after, maintained. We're also aware that, you know, as I mentioned, that some people that are sort of taking this as a sort of an opportunity to get a quick buck, maybe circumnavigate the tax man, throwing all the dogs into the back of a van or in the back of their car and then taking them for a walk is, you know, you've got the dog welfare to consider. So we've got a set of criteria that we measure commercial dog walkers against, and we will only issue a licence if they meet all those criteria. And our enforcement team should be double checking that, and those that don't meet the criteria and don't have a licence, they would receive a fixed penalty notice, because we've got the rules in place regarding the Environmental Protection Act that supports that.
Lovely, Paul. Thank you.
Just on a sideline, the other area that we've seen a huge increase in interest, commercial interest, is in fitness instructors. So we're in the process of issuing a licence for those, for the same reasons. If someone is taking up fitness in one of our parks and answered an advert for a fitness instructor, they want to be confident that the council knows about that particular person, is comfortable with that person, and they're not going to be harmed in any way or concerned in any way. So we're looking at that as well.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Sort of continuing with the Lido area, I was wondering what sort of lessons have been learnt from the pandemic and anything that will be used going forwards. Sort of booking systems, ticketing systems. Obviously, I believe there's been a change to the parking on Ducks Hill fairly recently. That is because that's just been a nightmare driving up there, and the danger of people walking across the road. Really. So I wonder what kind of learnings have been made that can be transferred going forward.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a number of learnings that have come about. I think we need to look at the Lido as a visitor attraction, as an event, rather than just looking at it as a park or an open space. So, we introduced some changes to the way we operated the site this year. So we had a event company help marshal the site and also helped with the parking arrangements. The issue that we have is that even though we have all of those in place and we limited the number of people that could come into the site, we did an assessment of what we believed was safe from a social distancing point of view, so we put a ceiling on the number of people. But what we found is that even though we were saying, sorry, the site is full, people still waited. So then we suddenly had this huge, great queue of people up Reservoir Road. And our marshals were then sort of saying the site is full at the end of Reservoir Road, but people still found other places to park. And it's where those other places to park was causing then impact on the residents. So that's why we're starting to consult with residents about parking controls that they could consider if they're happy to do so around a seasonal approach, because the Lido tends to just be busy during the main sort of Easter to sort of September, October period. So those sorts of things are in place. So what we're looking at the moment is working with specialists in the sort of visitor attraction area to see what other measures that we could put in place, other sort of ways of managing the site to ensure that it still remains a positive and enjoyable place, but we haven't got the negative connotations that we currently have relating to it. We know if we introduce more and more charges, all that does is just push people further away to park. We're also aware that people are quite happy to accept a parking fine in lieu of a fantastic day out. So sometimes the parking restrictions aren't becoming working against that particular individual. They're quite happy to accept it. So yeah, there's lots of learnings that we've come about. Again, we're not alone here. The Lake at Virginia Water, they've had similar issues with people sort of parking out on the A30 and the impact there. So, again, there's a number of parks and open spaces where these sorts of issues didn't really present themselves or only presented themselves several times of the year. Now they're more commonplace and we have to respond accordingly. So, yeah.
Councillor Farley, do you wish to have a supplementary?
Thank you, Chair. On page 10, obviously, congratulations to the winners. However, it's very East Coast orientated. So does that say the third paragraph, working with the local community? I was wondering how or what is being done by the council to engage more so that other areas of the borough can be, that have got. I know East Coast does a great job, but what can be done to sort of enhance other areas of the borough to win some of these awards?
I think one of the things that we've seen, again, it sort of talked about the change in public perception about leaving grass long. The other thing that we've seen a huge change in public perception about is getting involved in making their borough a better place. So we've already seen the Hillingdon litter pickers as a group that have established themselves. They sort of establish themselves and communicate via Facebook. We help, as our colleagues do in waste, in supporting them. But again, that's another example of the community playing a wider part in making their environment a better place. A lot of what the successes that Eastcote have had have been sort of self-generated and led by Eastcote and the residents of Eastcote. But it's not just down to Eastcote. We've got a number of volunteer groups that we have supported by my countryside and conservation officers. So we have groups that are working on the Hillingdon House farm with a charity called BCV, doing a number of initiatives there, improving that particular site. We've also just been approached by a group at Southlands that want to set up a volunteers group. They've met with Leslie Crowcroft at Eastcote to understand a little bit more how they operate and work. And they've approached us to see if we can actually help with their public liability insurance as we do for Eastcote. And obviously they're keen and enthusiastic to take part as well. Ruislip Woods, we've got a huge group of volunteers. Whatever the weather, they always turn out and help out as well. So we've got a group of volunteers there that support. So there's a number of probably, I wouldn't sort of say silent heroes, but probably unknown heroes. Obviously Leslie is very high profile in some of the things that she does and Eastcote, but there's quite a lot that is happening and supported by my team, primarily the countryside and conservation officers. But if there's a group of people that wants to get established, Cranford is another example of a group that's established themselves and helping us with the lottery funded bid. But we're more than happy to help and support these groups. Wherever they sort of present themselves, we do what we can to support them. We're keen. This is the added benefit. My team is only a sort of defined number. If we can expand the help that we can get from volunteers and the groups like the Hillingdon Litter Pickers to make Hillingdon an even more better place. The award that I think is the collective one is the Borough Award in London in Bloom, and that embraced everybody. The Eastcote, obviously, as a village was successful, but so was Harmondsworth. So, we've got a team down at Harmondsworth allotment that are very proactive, want to sort of improve Harmondsworth, and they've been liaising with the likes of the Airport Authority, tapping into grants that they have available, the rangers that the airport has available to again enhance Harmondsworth as well. So we are seeing this, but probably it's not being as highly promoted by those groups as yet, but we were certainly encouraging it, and Harmondsworth is a good case in point.
Thank you very much. Councillor Deville.
Hi Paul, it's a really good report. I was just going back to the trees. I took a group of young children down to a local park and we planted loads of saplings everywhere, and then about a month after that we went and planted proper trees, and when we go down to the park we see all the little lads all think that's their trees, so they're looking after them.
Oh, good.
So it's just so that you know that's what they're doing.
Yeah. That's it's good to hear. As I said, I think we planted a lot of trees with Trees for Cities at Field End Rec, and we've got the football club and the lads and lasses helping up plant the trees there, as well as the local school across the road. And I think getting children involved in that, getting involved in their environment, they get keen and enthusiastic, but as you say, they act as good custodians and look after those and encourage their parents also to do the same. So yeah, it's good.
Councillor Kaufman.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Just a quick one. Paul, we've got a lesser picking team in South Ruislip which go out once a month for an hour, then come back to the library and have donuts and coffee, and the sort of fellowship as well that brings to this group. The amount of rubbish that is picked up just in that 1 hour is amazing, and long may it continue, and this will be added to this group. As I say, it's been going for about 5 years now. We've got all the gear, we've got the storm coats, so they go out in the winter as well.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I think Hillingdon Litter Pickers is sort of growing. I can't remember the exact number is, but certainly when I last looked it was over 500.
Yeah, we weren't part of that. That was one guy set it all up, and I don't think he's there now.
but we're seeing that, you know, there's individuals that go out.
Yeah.
Breakspear Road, I think I saw a guy that went
Yeah.
out there and he just sort of litter picked outside his sort of patch, and you know, bags up the rubbish, and our colleagues sort of pick it up from waste and get rid of it. So
Chris phoned up during the peak period of the Lido and they were really in trouble, you know, trying to get clear the litter. So our lot went up there and
helped
spent the morning clearing this stuff, you know. Anyway, that's
it's certainly good to see. It's a big collective effort. You know, we can't really do everything on our own, so having the community help us is a great benefit.
Thank you very much. Time is marching on. We've been on this item now for about 45, maybe more minutes. So I want to try and get as many questions in as we can. There are people still wishing to ask questions, but can I just ask that the questions are brief and that the answers too are also brief, please, so that we can get these questions in. Councillor Brightman.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a quick statement, really. With regard to Hillingdon litter pickers, it's important to note that they're not an organised group. It's a spontaneous movement. People just decide that they're going out, and there are key individuals where you can pick up bags and pickers, etc. But it's not an organised group as such, so there's no liabilities.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think, you know, as I said, they're also using Facebook as a sort of communication tool, but it's just people's own initiatives. It's not one person that's collating it. You know, they just go out spontaneous, as you said, Councillor, and, you know, certainly just do a fantastic job.
Thank you very much. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Hillingdon litter pickers are very enthusiastic. I've been out with them myself. I just want to get back to the non-mow May and particularly with the flowers and the self-seeding plants. Just a little bit, want to understand that a bit more. So you mentioned that you sort of leave them to degrade on their own accord. I know that a lot of people welcome them. However, I have heard some downsides, should we call them, particularly when they're on junctions, Barrow Hall roundabout. I've had numerous residents say to me that that's been an issue of safety because they can't see. Whereas before they could see across the roundabout. Yeah. And now, you know, I was just wondering how soon you can sort of cut them down. You can sort of push them down or do something with them after they've sort of flowered and died off.
So really, the best approach is to let them sort of go through their natural life cycle. So they flower, they set seed, and then they sort of die off. And it's that point that you want to then sort of cut and clear. The point that you raised is a good one. Is a sort of mention that we sort of done a bit of a trial last year when we sowed the seeds. The climate, the weather was different. The spring was a lot drier, a lot warmer. So when the plants flowered, they were a lot shorter. And, you know, we didn't seem to get too many problems relating to sight lines and safety. There's one or two, but mainly there wasn't a concern. This year, the weather was completely different. So we had quite a wet and mild start to the season. So a number of the species, particularly the cow parsleys, sort of rocketed. So you had these plants that, you know, last year were, you know, 1 metre tall. This year they're like 2 metres tall. And that's where we had problems. And then once you got a bit of rain, then they all sort of fall down. And that's where we had some issues with sightlines. So regardless of the life cycle and everything else, that's a safety issue, so we go down and cut those out straight away. So as soon as those problems have been identified to us or we've seen them ourselves, we will go in there, trim those down and clear those sight lines. But where the plantings aren't a problem, our preferred approach is to let nature follow its own cycle, and then we sort of work along that cycle. We can't leave the material just to lie on the surface and decompose and, you know, not address it at all. That material has to be cut and has to be collected. As I mentioned, you know, it would rot. That would then increase the soil fertility. Then the more invasive species, the grasses, would then take over and then swamp out the wildflowers. So you need to go through a sort of a natural hay cut type approach for these areas to make them succeed. So as I said, we're still learning from this. There's still quite a bit that we're trialling, but certainly the observations that we've had this year have been very positive. As I said, we've seen areas that have been close mown for years, and we've left them long, and we had this plant called the cuckoo flower, Mayflower, come up. So you suddenly had this carpet of pink flowers in early spring. Obviously the seed bank was there, just waiting for the conditions to be there. And likewise, we've had orchids. We've had slipper orchids, which are pretty rare and unusual. Again, they were in the ground, but always close mown, so they never managed to sort of show their heads. Leaving that grass up, they popped, and again, they were really good. And things like just the dandelions, again, letting those flourish and flower. Very important for pollinators, bees, hoverflies, all the rest of it. So we're seeing that those sort of come up, and the common daisy as well. Again, all of these things are there. We just let them flourish, and then the biodiversity then benefits from it.
Any other questions before we move on to the next item? No? Okay. Paul, thank you very much for your presentation this evening and answering our questions. If you wish to leave, you're free to do so. Thank you very much. We move now on to our next item, which is the review findings of our engagement with tenants and leaseholders, improving participation and feedback to improve service and satisfaction. At this point, I would invite Neil to introduce this, who's been working hard behind the scenes with the recommendations, along with myself and other members. So whenever you're ready, Neil.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So just further to the brief report in the meeting papers, I did circulate some draft recommendations to the committee earlier in the week. I've also provided some hard copies for this evening. So before I invite members to comment on these, I should just remind people that the idea behind these recommendations is based upon the fact that we're so early in the development of the forthcoming strategy to address some of the things in that white paper. We're deliberately trying to set parameters by which further actions can be undertaken, but not being too prescriptive and mandating certain actions which might then be superseded by some of the additional information to come following further consultation with residents. So on that basis, that's what we've put together. Hopefully it covers the themes that have come out of the information gathering sessions, and I welcome committee comment. Thank you.
Comments and questions, please. Are there any? Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. I sort of take these sort of one by one. The first one, I was wondering if we could split that sort of. The reason being is that one being the experiences and one being the survey feedback. The survey feedback we're not expecting until the new year, considering that runs to the end of the year. But also, we heard testimony at the last meeting, and unfortunately the commentary was not very complimentary. So what I would like with this, if the committee agrees, is that the number one is split in some way, and also to formally acknowledge that there's been negative experiences. I believe from the testimony, the residents were saying that this has been going on for at least about 10 years at least, for one reason or another. I know we're trying to address it now, but it's to make sure that there's I just feel that noting is not, it's a little bit sort of fluffy and not kind of, that the council acknowledges, but then wants to do better. We want to improve. So it's acknowledging that, and the residents did say they felt undervalued, that they were not listened to. I think it's valuable that the council and the cabinet acknowledges that there have been negative experiences, explained to the committee, and that they acknowledge that, and that there is an intent, therefore, to move forward and do better, and then to split the survey one, because that is to come later on, because that doesn't actually finish until the end of this year, and then obviously that's going to take time to process those details. So I was wondering if that could be split. So that's just number one. So I'll stick with that first.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Councillor. So just to address that. So again, I welcome any other opinions on this, but just to explain the rationale behind this particular one. The review report will, of course, mentioned the feedback that was received at the previous information gathering session. It absolutely acknowledged that some of the feedback from those people was somewhat negative. However, it would be wrong potentially to ask the Cabinet to acknowledge that based on the testimony of what was quite a small number of people, when there is such a wealth of additional information that we are expecting to receive following further surveys and resident consultation. So on that basis, it was felt that this recommendation absolutely acknowledges the need to continuously improve, and obviously the actual bulk of the report will cover off in greater detail than these could possibly ever include in terms of the actual feedback that was received. So on that basis, I don't know what other people think. Welcome to listen to other people's opinions.
I would just say I was more or less going to say exactly the same. The document itself is a very meaty document which is read by the Leader and the Cabinet, and it will mention everything that was discussed at our previous meetings. And on that basis, I think, as I said, we're very early in this consultation stage. It was a very small number of people. I do acknowledge the negative feedback we got, but it'd be very too premature to do anything in terms of that wording before we've seen what the other feedback is from other residents. But it will mention it in the actual report, so I'm comfortable with the wording as it is. But like Councillor Farley, I would take steerage from the committee members present. Are there any other members wishing to comment?
On this one in
particular. On this point, sorry, in particular. Councillor Campbell.
You know, at the various meetings we mentioned the fact that when tenants move into a property, that there's nothing in there to tell them where the boiler is, where the washing machine goes, etc. All these small things that when you move into a private sector house, you get a welcome pack. And I think that would improve council-tenant relationships by saying we really do care and we welcome you to your your house, etc.
So yeah, thanks, Councillor. So I'm going to park that for a second because we're still on point one.
Yes, of course.
But again, just to explain, that's quite a granular thing, and so I'm sure that I haven't obviously written the report yet, but I'm sure when I come to writing the report, it will list a number of things that officers should be mindful in terms of actions, things like a checklist or a welcome pack for officers, something that could be considered. But in terms of these recommendations, that I think would be too granular and too specific for these particular recommendations.
No, I'm actually happy with this.
Oh, okay.
That's just an add-on issue.
Sure. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
And also, just if I'm going too far ahead, but in the last recommendation, it does say that it comes back to the committee as a suggestion to monitor and scrutinise, which will be the perfect opportunity for those sort of things. Councillor Chubatar?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to say I agreed with what you mentioned previously. Thanks.
Well, that was an easy one. Thank you. Anyone else? Neil, do you wish to add anything further?
No, as ever, I'm guided by the committee. If the members are happy with this wording, then that's one thing. Potentially, we could split out, as Councillor Farley suggested. That would need some consideration. I mean, part of this, following overall feedback received, I would make a request that the committee delegate authority to myself to make any potential amendments in consultation with the chairman. And then obviously you will see those recommendations as part of that final report, which will come back at the next committee. So,
is the committee happy with that proposal? Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Farley?
Just because it's on point one, or are we now talking about the entire document? Sorry,
I'm still on point one.
Fine. That's
so
fine. That's fine. That's if that's the case. The issue with the survey was obviously I don't know how long it's going to take to process that information. So that was the suggestion as to why to sort of split them up on that basis. Sure. Because obviously, unless Rod can sort of give us an idea about what the time frame is for once the survey is complete, what the processing time is for the information, the feedback. I'm not sure if that's something that's known at this point.
Would you like to comment, Rod?
Just to help matters, if you remember, we did a very small and short exercise with 100 residents. Yeah, just to give a flavour to committee during the session. in relation to some feedback from that particular cohort. So it was a very small group. It was just a litmus test, just to feed back to the group. I think we committed to do that at the first session, and then came back with the results at the second session. We are doing far bigger surveys. I think we mentioned our STAR survey, which is a survey of 10% of our customer base. So there aren't many services in the council which commit to that and deliver against it. We've got the STAR survey underway this year, and it's due to complete at the end of the calendar year. And those outcomes again will start to feed into our strategy. So that's a far bigger survey. So it was just a small, almost straw poll that we did during the sessions.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Rod. And just if I may, just jumping ahead to one of the other recommendations, the idea behind this is that there will be semi-regular overview scrutiny of this committee as the strategy develops. So you will see there should be a regular cadence of information coming back to the committee, inclusive of the results of further consultation and surveys. So that will then be used and scrutinised by the committee to help further inform direction of travel and subsequent actions.
Councillor Gardner?
My concern is that there are two sorts of surveys. You've got the online survey, where it's a box-ticking exercise, and you've got the in-person survey, where you ask people their opinion. And I'd like it somehow broken down so that we know what was part of the online stuff. Because, I mean, you can't explain things that are problematic if you've just got to tick a box. So I'd like it broken down like that. So there are two. You know, this is what we got from the online survey, and this is what we got from the in-person survey. Because it says here that there can be in-person contact as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I'm sure Rod and Mary might have a comment on that. But again, the appendix to the report suggests some of the actions that are open to officers in terms of engagement as the strategy and those actions progress. Some of that will undoubtedly be in-person consultation and obtaining feedback from residents. So again, we're at such an early stage that this information is to come and will be used by officers in terms of further action. So there will absolutely be both a mix of information received through virtual online means and also, hopefully, in person.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, we're looking at a mixed economy. There is no one survey that we're relying upon. We spoke about the STAR survey, which is quite an industry standard survey which helps us to promote benchmarking work. But a range of other transactional surveys, and also literally sitting down with people at the point of exiting our service. I think the example I gave was survivors of domestic abuse, where literally you're on a one-to-one structured conversation to see what worked well and how we could improve moving forward. So there is no one survey, just to make that clear.
Yeah, of course.
No, I understand that, but I would just like it so that we know the difference between what was done online and what was done face-to-face. Because I honestly have a problem with box-ticking exercises. So I'd like to know, person A said this, or person B ticked that. It's just so that we can differentiate between both systems.
Thank you. So we'll go on to the second point now, which is, as you can read from this, is really around what we heard and saw from the witnesses at the last meeting about their issues with the Senate and things like that. So this hopefully addresses a lot of the points that they've raised. Was there any comments? Or yes, Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if this would be for 2 or 4, which is why I'm raising it now. So my thing with this, we're looking at the hierarchy of involvement as a sort of a base structure for this. And it's a 3-year plan. That's fine. I'm wondering whether or not we can incorporate some sort of milestones within that, so that in terms of being held to account. So each time there's an update report that we get as a committee, that we have an expectation that they've reached some sort of stage, perhaps within that 3-year plan. So it's then to hold to account each of those stages.
I believe that's covered in point 4, is it, for the... Yeah.
Yeah, I think if it would help the committee, what we're committed to is to develop an overarching strategy, and sitting behind that would be a delivery plan. And given the work that we know we've got to do, we felt that it was reasonable to have a 3-year delivery plan. Within those annual segments, then there'd be clear expectations and milestones, and we've made a commitment there under number 4 to come back to committee with those updates. So it'd be reasonable to do those in line with those annual sections of the plan.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I said this 3 years. It was just sort of to have something which is a bit more firm. Sometimes we were looking at the hierarchy. Which page it's on? So let's say, for example, after the end of year 1, for example, you're now into the involved stage, for example. It was something that was a bit more tangible, I guess. I don't know if that's possible, but if you're working towards the pinnacle of that hierarchy.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely possible. I think the pyramid, the triangle, is the mixed economy that we're talking about. There's no one right nor wrong. What we want to do is provide a flexible approach to engagement and involvement which suits everybody, so we can maximise the degree of feedback. But certainly going back to the plan, then we'll absolutely have deliverables and milestones within each of those annual sections of that 3-year delivery plan. Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll go on to the third one. The third one, which is really self-explanatory around the social media platforms and the communications teams. Are there any issues with that, or are we happy for that one to stay in? Yeah. And the last one, as we've already mentioned, is in regards to scrutiny going forward through this committee. Are we happy with that? Yeah. Okay. So as Neil said earlier...
Maybe some minor...
Go ahead.
So there may be some very minor amendments based on the feedback, from my understanding members correctly, and if you're happy to delegate authority to myself to draft those alongside the Chairman.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you to Lord Marin. We go on to the Cabinet Forward Plan, item 7, pages 19 to 26. Are there any questions, comments, feedback? Nope. Great, thank you. Item 8 is the work programme.
If I may, Chairman.
Neil, yeah.
Yeah, just on the work programme, folks, you'll notice that I have put in reference to the meetings to come. I haven't yet populated that just because the dates were still to be approved by full council at the time of publication. So I'll obviously populate that with the regular items. However, there are a couple of one-off items as to come early next year, including an update on HMOs and an update on empty properties within the private sector. The officers drafting that has just asked for a brief steer in terms of exactly what the members wanted to see within those information reports. The Chairman has very kindly given me some things on empty properties, but was particularly in terms of HMOs, was there anything that the members wanted the reports to cover that I can feed back to the officers? You can always send something to me by email outside this meeting if you want to have a think about it.
I believe Councillor Chapman requested that one originally. I think in my email to you, Neil, I did suggest that as a very first step we just get an overview of what the HMO rules are in terms of the licences, etc., just for information purposes. But as Neil has said, if you have any further points you want to add in addition to that, then please let him know, or myself, and we can certainly add that in for you. And the empty properties, I said that was quite a lengthy email. Maybe you could circulate that to the members outside the meeting, and if they wish to comment on that and add anything else that I may have missed, that should hopefully build up to a very good report coming before this committee in the new year. Thank you very much.
Is that noted then?
Is that happy? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance this evening. That concludes our business for this evening. The time of the meeting completion is 8:15. Thank you very much. Have a safe journey home.